You're listening to Trek FM.
Hello and welcome to From There to Here, Trek FM's 50th anniversary rewatch of Star Trek, in which we look at all 729 episodes of the series from beginning to end. I'm Mike from Stage 9, and today I'm joined by Melissa. How's it going, Melissa?
Well, thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it. All right, so we're going to talk about 2 episodes of Deep Space Nine today, Civil Defense and Meridian. So Civil Defense, this is the episode where Jake and O'Brien accidentally trigger an anti-terrorism subroutine or whatever it is, which was set up by the Cardassians during the occupation in an effort to stop a uprising by the Bajoran workers. And now the station is on lockdown and everyone's going to die unless they figure out how to turn it off. So what did you think about Civil Defense?
I really enjoyed this episode. It's been a while since I've seen it, and I think what this episode does so great is it really gives you an insight into the characters, and particularly Kira, without her really being the main character, which is what I love. You get to see an opportunity of how much she had to go through during the occupation. Whenever something happens and they think they have a solution, something else happens, and there's always something. So it just shows how strong of a character that she is, that she's always had to battle against the Cardassians during the time. Another thing I really liked is that it shows about the Cardassian race, how, I don't even know how to describe it, but they had all these routines put in place, and then even the guy who's in charge of the station is like, I got this, I could save you. And then there's someone above him who's like, no, we don't really trust you because, you could be a coward. It's the same thing with Odo. It's like, yeah, we trust you, but we only trust you this much. So, I think that's one of the great things about Deep Space Nine is they have such great character development, and this show shows it without essentially the characters that are being developed being the main characters in the show. So I love that episode.
Yeah, I love the episode too. It's one of those episodes which I think lots of times gets overlooked because
I agree.
It seems rather insignificant in the grand scheme of things. It's not like a huge world-building episode or anything like that. It's basically just a mythology, or it's not a mythology episode, but it's like a standalone episode. But it's really good. I love stories and movies like this, these spam in a can stories, as James Cameron would say, where it's just like a group of people in a self-contained environment and they need to figure out how to survive or whatever with absolutely no help from the outside world, although you do get Gul Dukat, who shows up and he's of no help at all, but they never leave the station. They're stuck on the station the whole time. And I think that it's a really good example of that. They do a really good job of telling that type of story. It's almost like a puzzle more than anything. But you're right that it does give you a lot of insight into these characters and the Cardassians in particular, and it just sort of shows their lack of trust in the way that they operate as a people, as a government, and sort of like the mentality that they have in terms of running their operations. So yeah, I think that this episode is really, really good, and I think it's often very overlooked. And you're right that it also does give an interesting spotlight to a lot of characters who are secondary on Deep Space Nine, which is something which Deep Space Nine does exceptionally well. The fact that Gul Dukat and Garrick and everyone are technically...
Garrick, I love Garrick. Yeah, good point. Yeah,
they're like technically guest stars, but they are just as important to the series as Sisko or O'Brien or any of those people. And even in an episode like this where there's really, it's not like you need to you need to have these characters in a bottle show like this, like the next generation equivalent would probably be something like Disaster or something, with the earthquake in space, but they do have all these characters here, and they do play like an integral role, and I think it's pretty interesting. The one thing which I always find kind of weird, although I mean it speaks to the complexity of these relationships or whatever, is the fact that like basically when Ducat comes in, he's like, oh yeah, I'll totally help you guys, and he's not being any help at all as this thing is like firing on everyone except for him. And you really get insight into what these people think of each other when someone like Ducat has the upper hand and can let them all die, right then and there if he wants to.
It also shows like that part where I think Ducat is like, well, I'll let you guys free if you give me back control of the station. Mm-hmm. I mean, it just shows that he's not really okay with the Bajorans being free or even losing that station. And they still, like, there's still that Cardassian that still wants to control them, And it shows how the Federation is, in a sense, helping the Bajorans, because without them, who knows? I mean, maybe it would fall again to Cardassian.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know. I mean, the Bajorans obviously are fighting Rays, but I mean, you never know. And I also like, this is a little bit off, is that I like that Quark, has the level 7 clearance.
Yeah.
Because it shows it's like, how did Quark survive? It's like, Ferengi's a bargain, but that's not what Cardassian is about, or the Cardassians seem to worry about. But here he is. He has a little something tucked under his sleeve that he still keeps for bargaining chips.
Yeah, and that Quark-Odo relationship is really cool, and I think they do a really good job with it here.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I do love that relationship throughout the show.
Yeah. All right. Well, should we move on to our next episode?
If we must.
Okay. The episode is Meridian. Now, this is the Deep Space Nine episode where they find a planet which just kind of phases into existence, and it turns out that it's this planet where it goes between our existence and like another plane of existence where they're like energy or something like that, and it phases back into our reality like once every 65 years or something, but it's only for like a short amount of time, and that time is getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and basically they're trying to figure out a way to get them to stay here permanently if they so choose. And Dax is on the case, and there's, a hot young, well, I guess not young since they've been around for like thousands of years.
He
or
looks
whatever
young. It's okay. Call him young.
He looks, I guess Dax isn't young either.
And who knows how age? What do you mean? She's not young.
Well, she's like 350 years old or something, right?
Okay.
I guess she's young.
Dax is, but Jadzia is not.
Yes.
Okay, it's not important. Keep going. Sorry.
Okay. So
hot young fox there. It's all that matters.
Yes. And she and Dax, get it on, and he's like, hey, why don't you come and live with me in this other plane of existence for the next 65 years? And she's like, yeah, I'm totally going to do that.
That's how incredible he is.
I guess so. And then hijinks ensue. So what did you think about Meridian?
Well, it's kind of funny because when we were talking about this before, I completely forgot that plot and really focused on Quark and Kira and the guy who was trying to buy the holosuite.
Who's I think that was Jeffrey Combs.
Yes, which I love. I love him as an actor because he plays so many different roles, and he's just so great at it. And he was so creepy in this one. I just think he's incredible. But yes, it was Jeffrey Combs. But as far as, I guess, the plot A, as you described it to me, it was interesting. I mean, even they touched on, I guess, my concern in a sense where Sisko's like, well, I know Jadzia wouldn't just do it if she didn't really feel it. So I'm like, okay, well, that's how I felt about that. But I also think that, as her character being someone involved with science, I guess it was for the guy, but in my mind, it's like, as a science person, I mean, you have an opportunity to explore this whole nother level of being, this whole nother way of interacting with things and seeing how things work. So I can understand her desire to try this. I mean, why not? Why not see what it's like to live as pure consciousness, to just be yourself without being judged for, like, this physical body or this physical appearance. Like, you are basically by your mind, that you're being judged for, which is incredible, which is, I don't know, how I see Star Trek. Like, that's that whole concept. Like, you're just judged by your thoughts and your being and not by what you look like, what you are, There's just so much more to people, and I think that episode showed that there's more to people, or the whole point of doing that.
I guess that's an interesting point. I can see that. I never really thought about it that way. Because, like, my thinking is, like, you say, like, well, what do you have to lose? And I'm like, well, what if you get there and you're like, whoa, this is not what I signed up for. And they're like, sorry, you're stuck here for another 65 years. That would suck.
Yeah, but, who else would get the opportunity to explore that? It's all science. It's all like, okay, so I did this to get to this point. I'm able to sustain this for this long. It's so neat. Like, but she isn't able to, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But what is weird to me is that because she has the trill, that she's just allowed to do something like that without seeing what the effects are to the trill. Is the trill home world okay with this? It just seems like she's part of a bigger...
I guess so. I don't think that she's, like, a slave to that, though. I think that the trill can do whatever he wants to, or she, or whatever it is.
There we go. You put in gender.
Yeah.
Odd. That's the whole point of the episode. No, I'm just joking.
And, I think that, it's like one of those things where maybe because trill live so much longer than humans, 65 years is like, oh yeah, whatever, that's cool, I can do that, and then I'll be back here and it'll be all good. But I just think that, I don't know, I wouldn't want to do that, especially since, you bring up the science aspect. It did not seem like that was her main motivation. She just had a thing for this guy, and it's like, you've known him for literally like a week, You're
right. It was really odd, but...
And,
I want to believe it's for the science.
Okay, I don't think it is. I really don't think it is.
You're probably right. They didn't really mention... I don't know if they mentioned that as being her excuse.
And, Cisco does say, like, oh, Dax, this is so unlike you. And she's like, yeah, I know, that's why you can tell that it's for real, or something like that. And I'm like, that does not work for me at all. That was the writers trying to come up with an excuse for what. But no, she would totally not do that. She would not do that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree. And yeah, I'm probably pushing the science thing a little much. But another cool thing about it is we are introduced to another race. And I think that's one of the things that you hear a lot of complaints about with Deep Space Nine, is that people are like, well, they're always on the, space station and they're not really exploring. And, here's another example of, like, everyone out there who doesn't like it because they're always on the station. Here they're exploring another species, which is what's great about Star Trek, is that we're looking into this whole nother world where you can live, like, as pure conscience, and then you can come back into, like, corporeal or physical being. And it's like, that's incredible. There's a species that does this. Someone thought of this species, and this is how they live, and they can only, like, reproduce at this time, and this is all thought of. And it's kind of cool whenever there's someone's creativity goes into developing a species, then you kind of just wonder, can that happen, or is that out there? So I like that, because you always get that ding on Deep Space Nine because they don't explore more in space.
Yeah, it's more about people coming to them. But yeah, and this was, I guess, one of the more unique alien races, because a lot of them are just like, well, they have slightly different foreheads and they are grumpy, or whatever. But here's, like, a race where it's like they don't even exist as, physical entities for the majority of their existence.
Yeah, and you learn about a lot about the culture, not just like they've met them and it's like you said, they look like this, but here we are, we know, like, every person on the planet has a job. This is, like, she's met, I think he was the engineer, the science officer, and everyone has their place, which is interesting to learn how a species runs, and you learn that about it. And you learn about, like, their state, that kind of stuff. You learn that they were once descendants of another, I think, like Colin, I don't know, but it's just, you learn a lot about it, and you don't always get that in the other episodes. And I think this is just another explanation of how great the writers are on Deep Space Nine, and how they just took a random story, and yeah, some of the points are a little fudged, but you get insight into another culture, which is always great.
Yeah, for sure. All right.
Wait, what did you think about the holosuite? Were you okay with that? Because to me, that's what I remembered, and you're like, well, that wasn't important, and I'm like,
well, I just said it was the B story.
I know, but it stood out. That was like, that's all I remembered until you mentioned this part. I'm like, oh yeah, that
Well,
part was really cool. I don't know why I thought it was like a separate episode or something.
Lots of times the B stories in Star Trek are better than the A stories, and this might be one of those times because I don't exactly know how good Meridian is. It bothers me as like a just because I don't see Dax doing that, you know.
And okay, I agree. I mean, but that's one
Yeah.
problem with the episode. Did you
Yeah.
like the rest of the episode, or
I mean,
no?
it was fine, but
Yeah,
it
was fine. I agree.
had like interesting concepts in it. But to me, like as far as like telling this story, it didn't work for these characters.
Okay.
But yeah, as far as the B plot is concerned, with Quark trying to get the hollow image of Kira, I thought it was. It's very sitcom-y,
It's very creepy.
It's very creepy, yes. But, whatever. It's like a little comic thing, and it was fine.
And it was weird to have Kira in the comic role.
Yeah. So, I don't know. It was fine, I guess, but on the whole, not too great.
Okay, so on the whole, we both like civil
defense.
We both like civil defense, and Meridian was
not so great, but...
Yeah. But I mean,
yeah. Well, tomorrow we're talking about some awesome stuff. But
I'm always happy to watch Deep Space Nine. So.
Well, yeah, it's the best. So, all right, cool. Well, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It was fun. Something different, right?
Yeah. As always, you can find me right here on Trek FM doing Stage 9, where we talk about the people who make Star Trek. And you can find me on Twitter at Mumbles3K. And Melissa and I will be back tomorrow to talk about 2 more episodes, or actually an episode and a movie, Defiant and Generations.